The most powerful way to deal with someone who has wronged you is not always to hurt them back. Sometimes the strongest response is to become impossible to manipulate. When someone insults you, betrays you, disrespects you, or deliberately tries to weaken your position, your first instinct may be revenge. You want them to feel what you felt. You want them to suffer. You want them to understand that they made a mistake. Never punish in anger, because anger destroys judgment at the exact moment when judgment is most necessary. When someone insults you, betrays you, humiliates you, or deliberately tries to provoke you, your first instinct may be to respond immediately. You may want to send the message, expose the person, confront them, or make them experience the same pain they caused you. But emotional reactions often give your opponent more power than they deserve. The moment another person can control your behavior simply by making you angry, they have gained influence over you. They know which words to use, which subjects to touch, and which actions will make you lose control. A person who reacts impulsively becomes predictable, and predictability makes manipulation easier. This is why the first discipline is to pause. Do not make important decisions while your emotions are at their highest intensity. Give yourself time to understand what actually happened and what response serves your interests. Anger often wants immediate satisfaction, but strategy requires patience. You may feel that responding quickly proves strength, when in reality, restraint can demonstrate much greater control. This does not mean allowing people to mistreat you. It means refusing to let their behavior dictate your timing. There is a difference between weakness and controlled response. Weakness allows harmful behavior to continue because you are afraid to act. Controlled strength recognizes the problem, considers the consequences, establishes a boundary, and responds deliberately. Before reacting, ask yourself what outcome you actually want. Do you want to protect your reputation? Do you want to prevent the behavior from happening again? Do you want distance from the person? Do you need to communicate a boundary, or do you simply want emotional satisfaction? These goals are not always the same. An angry response may satisfy the desire for revenge while damaging the goal of protecting your future. Sometimes the smartest response is direct communication. Sometimes it is distance. Sometimes it is removing access. Sometimes it's documenting behavior and using appropriate formal channels. The important thing is that the response should be chosen for its effectiveness rather than its emotional intensity. Anger also creates exaggeration. When you are emotionally charged, one insult can suddenly become evidence that someone has always hated you. One betrayal can make you believe that nobody can be trusted. One conflict can become a battle for your entire identity. Step back and separate facts from interpretation. What exactly happened? What evidence do you have? What part of the situation can you influence? What response will create the least unnecessary damage? These questions return your mind to reality. Another danger is public reaction. People sometimes respond to humiliation by trying to embarrass the other person in front of everyone. They reveal private information, post emotional messages, or make accusations that cannot easily be taken back. Once released, words can travel beyond your control. A few seconds of anger can create months or years of consequences. Restraint protects you from decisions your future self may regret. The strongest response is often delayed until your emotions have settled. Once calm, you may discover that the situation requires far less energy than you originally believed. You may realize that the person does not deserve your attention, or you may recognize that a firm boundary is necessary. Either way, you respond from clarity rather than emotional chaos. Do not confuse revenge with strength. Real strength is maintaining control over yourself when someone is trying to take that control away. Let the other person reveal their character through their behavior while you reveal yours through your restraint. When you refuse to become a prisoner of anger, you regain the ability to choose your response, protect your interests, and move forward without allowing another person's actions to dictate your behavior. Let consequences teach the lesson, because not every wrong requires you to become the person who delivers punishment. Sometimes the most effective response to harmful behavior is to stop protecting someone from the natural results of their own choices. People learn through consequences because consequences connect behavior with reality. If someone repeatedly breaks promises, lies, disrespects boundaries, or behaves irresponsibly, constantly rescuing them from the results only teaches them that they can continue without paying a meaningful price. You do not need to create suffering for them. You simply need to stop absorbing the cost of their behavior yourself. This requires a clear understanding of the difference between punishment and consequences. Punishment is often driven by the desire to make another person suffer. Consequences are about protecting yourself and allowing reality to respond to behavior. If someone repeatedly violates your trust, you may reduce the amount of trust you give them. If someone consistently wastes your time, you may stop making yourself available. If someone refuses to fulfill their responsibilities, you may stop covering for them. These actions are not necessarily revenge. They are decisions based on patterns. A person should eventually experience the results of how they behave. One of the reasons people struggle with this principle is that they want immediate justice. They want the other person to understand exactly what they did and feel the same pain. But real life does not always provide immediate justice. Some people may never apologize. Some may never admit they were wrong. Some may even believe they were justified. If your peace depends on receiving an apology or witnessing their regret, you have handed them control over your emotional recovery. Instead, focus on what you can control. You can decide what access they have to you. You can decide what information you share. You can decide whether you continue the relationship. You can decide whether you trust them with responsibility. These decisions communicate consequences without requiring dramatic confrontation. It is also important to make consequences consistent. If you repeatedly announce a boundary but never enforce it, people learn that your words have no real effect. A boundary becomes meaningful when your behavior changes after it is crossed. You do not need to threaten someone every time. Simply follow through. If a person repeatedly insults you during conversations, end the conversation. If they repeatedly misuse your trust, stop giving them sensitive information. If they repeatedly create unnecessary conflict, create distance. Your response should match the pattern of behavior rather than the intensity of your emotions. This protects you from overreacting to isolated mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, and not every mistake deserves permanent consequences. Pay attention to repetition, intent, and willingness to correct behavior. Someone who makes a genuine mistake, takes responsibility, and changes deserves a different response from someone who repeatedly harms others and refuses accountability. Discernment matters. Consequences can also teach you something about yourself. Sometimes you realize that you have been protecting people because you feared conflict, loneliness, or rejection. You may have continued forgiving behavior that should have changed your trust. You may have accepted excuses because enforcing a boundary felt uncomfortable. Recognizing this pattern gives you an opportunity to strengthen yourself. You cannot control whether another person learns from consequences, but you can learn from the experience yourself. The goal is not to become obsessed with making people pay. That obsession keeps your attention connected to them. The goal is to stop carrying responsibilities that belong to someone else. Let people experience the results of their choices while you focus on maintaining your own standards. If someone loses your trust because they repeatedly violated it, that is not necessarily cruelty. It is the natural result of their behavior. If someone loses access to your time because they repeatedly disrespected it, that is not revenge. It is a boundary. When you understand this distinction, you become less interested in dramatic punishment and more interested in creating healthy consequences. You stop asking, how can I hurt them? and start asking what should happen because of this behavior. That shift protects your dignity, reduces unnecessary conflict, and allows reality itself to teach lessons that anger never could. Withdraw attention and access because not everyone deserves continued access to your time, energy, trust, or emotional attention. One of the most powerful responses to disrespect is not a dramatic confrontation, but a deliberate change in what you are willing to give. People often underestimate the value of attention because it feels invisible, but attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess. What you repeatedly focus on influences your emotions, your decisions, and your behavior. When someone constantly provokes you, argues with you, disrespects you, or creates unnecessary drama, continuing to give them your attention can allow them to remain powerful in your life, even when they no longer deserve that position. This does not mean ignoring every problem or refusing to communicate. It means recognizing when communication has stopped being productive and when continued engagement is simply feeding a destructive pattern. If someone insults you and you spend hours arguing with them, they have successfully captured your attention. If someone tries to provoke you online and you respond to every message, you are allowing them to decide where your mental energy goes. If someone repeatedly creates chaos and you constantly rush to fix it, you may be teaching them that you will always absorb the consequences of their behavior. Withdrawal changes that pattern. You do not always need to announce that you are withdrawing. Sometimes you simply become less available. You answer less frequently. You stop explaining yourself repeatedly. You stop sharing personal information. You stop participating in pointless arguments. You stop giving access to your private thoughts. The goal is not to manipulate the other person into chasing you. The goal is to protect yourself. This distinction is essential. Withdrawal should not become a psychological game where you disappear only to make someone desperate for your attention that still keeps your mind focused on them. Genuine withdrawal is quieter. You recognize that the relationship, conversation, or situation is no longer healthy or useful, and you redirect your energy elsewhere. Your attention returns to your work, your goals, your relationships, your learning, and your own development. This is particularly important when dealing with people who depend on emotional reactions. Some individuals become more aggressive when they discover that they can provoke you. They may criticize you, create arguments, spread rumors, or deliberately challenge your boundaries simply to get a reaction. If you respond emotionally every time you reinforce the behavior, calm distance removes the reward. Instead of becoming emotionally available to every provocation, you become selective about what deserves a response. This does not mean becoming cold or passive. There are situations where direct communication and firm action are necessary, especially when someone's behavior creates serious harm or crosses important boundaries. But even then, you can respond without giving unnecessary emotional access. State what is unacceptable, explain the boundary if needed, and follow through. You do not have to spend hours proving that you are right. Access should also be earned. Trust should not be given equally to everyone. Some people demonstrate through their actions that they can handle responsibility, confidentiality, and respect. Others demonstrate the opposite. Pay attention to patterns. If someone repeatedly misuses your trust, reduce what they are trusted with. If someone repeatedly wastes your time, reduce their access to it. If someone repeatedly creates conflict, create distance. You are not required to keep offering the same privileges to someone who continually demonstrates that they cannot handle them responsibly. Your time is limited, and every hour spent managing unnecessary drama is an hour removed from something more valuable. The strongest form of withdrawal is often replacing obsession with direction. Instead of watching what the other person is doing, focus on what you are building. Instead of wondering whether they regret their behavior, ask whether you are becoming stronger and wiser because of the experience. Instead of trying to make them understand your value, invest your energy in developing your own value. When you withdraw attention and access for the right reasons, you are not trying to punish someone emotionally. You're establishing control over your own resources. You decide who receives your presence, who receives your trust, and which conflict deserve your energy. That ability to choose is a form of personal power because you no longer allow every difficult person to enter your mind, consume your attention, or dictate the direction of your day. Protect your boundaries because confidence and self-respect become meaningless if you allow other people to repeatedly cross limits without consequences. A boundary is not a weapon, a threat, or an attempt to control another person. It is a clear decision about what you will accept, what you will not accept, and what you will do when someone crosses that line. Many people struggle with boundaries because they fear rejection, conflict, disappointment, or being called selfish. They tolerate disrespect because they believe keeping peace is more important than protecting themselves. But peace created by constantly betraying your own needs is not real peace. It is exhaustion disguised as harmony. When you repeatedly allow someone to insult you, manipulate you, waste your time, invade your privacy, or disregard your values, you are teaching them that the behavior carries no meaningful consequence. People often pay attention to patterns more than words. You can explain your boundary 100 times, but if your behavior never changes, the message becomes weak. This is why a boundary must be supported by action. If someone repeatedly speaks to you disrespectfully, you can end the conversation. If someone continually demands your time without respecting your responsibilities, you can become less available. If someone repeatedly breaks your trust, you can stop giving them information that requires trust. The goal is not to make the other person suffer. The goal is to protect yourself from continued harm. A strong boundary is usually simple and consistent. You do not need a long speech explaining every emotion behind it. Sometimes a calm statement is enough. I am not willing to continue this conversation while you speak to me that way. Then you follow through. If the behavior continues, you leave the conversation. This creates clarity. You are showing that your words have meaning because your actions support them. Another important principle is that boundaries should be based on your behavior, not attempts to control someone else's behavior. You cannot force another person to stop being rude, dishonest, or irresponsible. You can decide what you will do when they behave that way. This distinction gives you power because your response remains within your control. Instead of saying, you must respect me, you can decide, if you disrespect me, I will remove myself from the situation. You are not controlling them. You are controlling your participation. Boundaries also require you to tolerate discomfort. When you first begin setting limits, people who benefited from your lack of boundaries may resist. They may accuse you of changing. They may call you selfish. They may become angry because they are no longer receiving the same access to your time, attention, or energy. Do not automatically interpret their reaction as evidence that your boundary is wrong. Sometimes resistance simply means that a pattern is changing. At the same time, healthy boundaries require judgment. Not every mistake deserves immediate separation. People can misunderstand, apologize, learn, and improve. Look for patterns rather than reacting to one imperfect moment. A person who makes a genuine mistake and takes responsibility is different from someone who repeatedly crosses the same boundary and expects forgiveness without changing. Protecting your boundaries also means protecting your internal world. You do not have to reveal every plan, every fear, every personal detail, or every ambition to everyone. Privacy can be a form of strength. Share important information with people who have demonstrated that they can handle it responsibly. Trust should be built through consistent behavior, not demanded instantly. Your time deserves the same protection. You cannot be available to everyone and still give your best attention to the things that matter most. Learn to say no without excessive explanation. No can be a complete sentence when the situation does not require further discussion. The more consistently you protect your boundaries, the more you teach yourself that your standards matter. That internal respect strengthens confidence because you know you will not abandon yourself simply to keep someone else comfortable. You become calmer because you no longer need to fight every battle. You know where your limits are, you know what actions you will take when they are crossed, and you follow through without unnecessary drama. Do not seek revenge, seek position, because revenge often keeps you emotionally connected to the very person you are trying to defeat. When someone hurts, humiliates, betrays, or disrespects you, the desire to make them suffer can feel powerful. You imagine proving them wrong, damaging their reputation, taking something from them, or making them experience the same pain they caused you. But revenge can become a trap. It keeps your attention focused on another person's actions instead of your own future. You begin measuring your success by whether they are suffering rather than by whether your own life is improving. This gives the person who hurt you a strange kind of continued influence. They may be physically absent, but they remain present in your thoughts. Real strength begins when you stop asking, "How can I hurt them?" and start asking, "How can I improve my position?" Your position includes your reputation, skills, relationships, opportunities, financial stability, emotional control, knowledge, and ability to make independent decisions. These are areas where your energy can produce lasting results. If someone rejects you, improve yourself instead of spending your time trying to make them regret it. If someone betrays you, become more discerning about whom you trust instead of becoming obsessed with exposing them. If someone underestimates you, develop your abilities until their opinion becomes irrelevant. This does not mean ignoring serious wrongdoing or refusing to protect yourself. There are situations where you should document harmful behavior, establish firm boundaries, seek appropriate support, or use legitimate channels to address misconduct. The principle is that your response should protect your interests rather than satisfy an emotional desire for revenge. Position is built through patience. When emotions are intense, you may want immediate results. You want the other person to understand what they did and recognize that they made a mistake. But you cannot control whether someone feels regret. Some people will never apologize. Some will justify their actions. Some may even tell a completely different story about what happened. If your recovery depends on their confession, you remain dependent on them. Instead, make your progress independent of their recognition. Build quietly, improve your skills, strengthen your discipline, become more selective with your relationships, protect your time. Learn from the experience. The goal is not to create an impressive performance for the person who hurt you. The goal is to become stronger whether they notice or not. This is why revenge is often weaker than transformation. Revenge requires continued attention to the enemy. Transformation redirects that attention toward yourself. You take the energy created by anger and convert it into preparation. You take disappointment and convert it into discernment. You take rejection and convert it into independence. You take betrayal and convert it into stronger boundaries. The experience remains part of your history, but it no longer controls your direction. Seeking position also requires patience because meaningful improvement rarely happens overnight. If you have been damaged professionally, socially, or emotionally, rebuilding may take time. Do not allow the desire for immediate revenge to make you sacrifice long-term progress. A reckless response can damage your own reputation while giving the other person exactly what they wanted. An emotional reaction, remain difficult to provoke, think several steps ahead. Ask what your response will cost you tomorrow, next month, or next year. This does not mean becoming calculating in a harmful way. It means becoming responsible for the consequences of your choices. Your strongest answer to disrespect is often not a dramatic confrontation. It is becoming more capable, more independent, and less accessible to manipulation. When you improve your position, you gain options. You can walk away from unhealthy relationships because you are not dependent on them. You can reject manipulation because you recognize it. You can withstand criticism because your identity is built on something deeper than approval. You can face competition without becoming consumed by jealousy. Your life becomes larger than the conflict that once occupied your mind. The person who hurt you may eventually notice your growth, or they never notice it. Either outcome should become irrelevant. Your objective is not to make them regret losing you. Your objective is to become someone who no longer needs their regret. When your attention moves from revenge to position, you stop fighting battles that keep you emotionally trapped and start investing in the only territory you can truly control, your own character, abilities, choices, and future. Let your success become the final answer, because one of the most powerful ways to respond to people who doubted, disrespected, underestimated, or tried to weaken you is to stop arguing with them and start building a life that speaks for itself. When someone hurts your pride, your first instinct may be to explain yourself. You want them to understand your intentions, recognize your value, admit that they were wrong, or regret the way they treated you. But constantly trying to prove yourself keeps you psychologically connected to their judgment. You begin making decisions for an audience that may not even deserve a place in your life. A stronger approach is to redirect that energy toward your own development. Instead of explaining what you are capable of, become capable. Instead of announcing your plans, work on them quietly. Instead of demanding respect, develop qualities that naturally command it. Success in this sense is not simply money, fame, status, or public recognition. It can mean becoming more disciplined, emotionally stable, skilled, independent, knowledgeable, and selective about where you invest your energy. When you improve these areas, your confidence becomes less dependent on other people's opinions. You no longer need to convince someone that they made a mistake by underestimating you. Your actions provide the evidence. This does not mean living your entire life to prove someone wrong. That can become another form of dependence. If your motivation is always, I will succeed so they will regret it, then they are still controlling your direction. The deeper goal is to reach a point where their opinion becomes irrelevant to your progress. Use criticism as information, but do not make criticism your identity. If someone says you lack a skill, examine whether there is truth in it. If there is, improve. If there is not, continue without becoming obsessed with defending yourself. Your response should be growth rather than endless argument. Quiet progress is especially powerful because it protects your energy. You do not need to announce every improvement. You do not need to tell everyone what you are planning. Sometimes sharing too much creates pressure to perform for other people instead of allowing yourself to learn privately. Work, practice, study, and improve without needing immediate recognition. The results will eventually speak more clearly than promises ever could. Success also changes your relationship with rejection. When you become more capable, one person's rejection no longer feels like a final judgment on your worth. You understand that opportunities are specific. One person can say no while another says yes. One environment may not recognize your abilities while another may value them. This perspective prevents you from turning temporary rejection into permanent insecurity. Your responsibility is to keep developing until you have more choices. The same principle applies to disrespect. If someone treats you as though you have no value, do not waste your life demanding that they see your value. Their perception belongs to them. Your development belongs to you. Improve your standards, your skills, your communication, your discipline, and your ability to walk away from situations that repeatedly diminish you. Sometimes the strongest response is simply becoming unavailable for the same treatment. Your success should also include peace. If you become wealthy or accomplished, but remain obsessed with people who once hurt you, you have not fully escaped their influence. Freedom means that your attention has returned to your own life. You wake up thinking about your goals rather than their opinions. You measure yourself by your progress rather than their reactions. You build because building matters to you, not because someone is watching. When your life becomes stronger, calmer, and more purposeful, you no longer need dramatic revenge. You have answered through action. The person who doubted you may notice or may not. Either way, you continue moving. The final answer is not proving that someone else was wrong. It is becoming so focused on what you can build that their judgment no longer determines the value of what you are capable of becoming.